The Washington Post is reaching out. Huffington Post is reaching out. NBC News is reaching out. Shit is wild, right? The paper went viral.
I know you are the holder of an EB1. So which category of these three was it that got you yours?
What happened that took you from a master's in computer science to a PhD in communication studies to being a professor after that? Americans are low context, which means everything they do is with words. But Indians, we are high context. We are very non-verbally. That's where the head nod even comes in.
The Lulu is the Salulu.
2014, the director of the program calls me into his office and says, well, Aditi, the entire department has decided to fire you from the program. You have 3 months left. Although she's very Walter Whitey, I am Jesse Pinkman in this relationship. Have you watched Breaking Bad?
It's my favorite show of all time.
Even if I go to India, it has to be in my terms.
I'm Naman Pandey, and in this episode, my guest is Dr. Aditi Paul. Dr. Aditi is an ex-tenured professor, published author, and the founder of Dr. Paul and Company, where she helps Indian immigrants take charge of their immigration journey by means of securing the EB1 visa, which she holds, and other talent visa. We go over Aditi's journey, starting with her student visa days, what made her move to the US, switching from a path of STEM to out of STEM, which is rare, and then finally securing the EB1 visa. It was very amusing to uncover how her research paper on dating and its dynamics in the digital age, after she was basically asked to leave from her department during her PhD, led her to be featured on every major news channel website in the country. Sticking to her psychology and communication roots, we go over the psychology of immigration and how Indian immigrants can best get assimilated to the culture in the States. Frankly, a lot of what turned out to be myths that I had about the EB1 and other talent visas were cleared up through my conversation with Aditi. And in keeping with our theme of learning from somebody that's just 2 steps ahead of us instead of an expert, I'd like to emphasize that this conversation centers on Aditi's unique immigration journey and how anyone can build their profile for EB1 and other talent visas from day one. This is the Ready Set Do podcast, and to support it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And now, my dear friends, without any further ado, my conversation with Dr. Aditi Paul.
Welcome to the Ready Set Do podcast, where we discuss journeys of not experts who are just 2 steps ahead of us. I know when we connected offline, you asked me to not do this, but I'm going to do it one last time here. Welcome, Dr. Aditi.
My gosh, yes. Thank you so much, Sir Naman Pandey.
Well, at least one of our titles, one of us worked really hard for. So we have that going for ourselves here.
You know,
But
if you talk to my PhD advisor, he will have a different opinion. But let's not go there. I have it. That's what I would say. If I work hard for it or not, that's up for debate.
really excited to host you. And to get the ball rolling, do you kind of mind walking us through your journey and how you came to establish Dr. Paul and Company and all the amazing work that you do with and for immigrants currently?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I have said this in podcasts before as well. Say it to you right now as well. If you're looking for some inspirational, monolithic, this was my passion, this is what I went for it, not gonna find it. You're seriously not gonna find it. The consistent theme across the board is I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyway. That is honest to God the thing that I always go back to. You and I, we're both from Calcutta, so I'll start there. And if you're born and raised in India in the 90s and the 2000s, maybe even now,
Mhm.
there are only 3 options that are presented to you: science, arts, and commerce. Arts is for people who definitely want to be broke in life. At least that's what parents convince us to, that we will be on the street. Commerce is for sons of business owners. You know, these are make a very, very, very Calcutta joke over here, but these are the 6 a.m. batch St. Xavier's College crowd who
Yep.
go at 6 a.m. do some random classes, and then at 9 a.m. they're out the door, have their chai, and then they go and prepare for their CPA exam or go and sit in their dad's company. So that was
That's
not
just timeless. I feel like that hasn't changed at all.
hasn't changed, yeah. And the only option that was left was science. And what didn't help was my dad was a chemical engineer turned business owner. So my dad is a trust fund baby. He's a Nepo baby. I even give him grief till now. And so I grew up in a family which was, yeah, you have to do business, but you cannot be one of those like
Mhm.
मुझे पढ़ाई नहीं करना मुझे सिर्फ business करना है like that. Like you have to have good grades, and then
Mhm.
if you decide to work for yourself, you work for yourself. So that was always the narrative that I grew with. Again, please remember the fact that I said I did everything that I did not want to do. So I did not want to do science in class 12, did science. Did not want to study computer science after class 12, just wanted to study in St. Xavier's College, did not even matter what I was choosing. Did bachelor's in computer science, did not want to do master's in computer science, did master's in computer science. And at this time, my sister got pregnant in the US,
Mhm.
and I came to visit my nephew. And I have been trying to not study Naman since class 12, right? I mean, there was a concerted effort for me to not study. And somehow things kept presenting in my life where education has been like this big thing. So when I came to the US for a vacation to cuddle my nephew, my sister is like, yo, you keep complaining about computer science, like have you want to do something about communications, like communication, mass communication, like what's your plan? I got no plan. I just know I don't want to do a 9 to 5 after
Mhm.
I graduate from this like dumb masters in computer science that I'm doing because I had no other option. So
Mhm.
she's like, let's go and talk to some professors over here, see what they say. So I went and
Hmm.
I talked to some professors, and I said that, look, I don't have any background in communication studies. I have my entire career in the sciences. Am I able to study computers, communication studies? They're like, yeah, we'll take you. So that's how I
Hmm.
started my journey in the US. Again, did not want to do PhD. I was like, what is the easiest way out? So
Mhm.
my sister is like, listen, if you get your master's in mass communication, first of all, dad is not going to pay for shit. And secondly, this is as sacrilegious as marrying outside of your religion. Like, this is a love marriage from Bollywood. Like, leaving computer
Yeah.
science to study communication studies. Are you crazy?
One does not simply do that. Nobody in
One
their right
does not
minds.
do that. Oh my God, the Dosekis meme. Um, so my dad was not going to pay. So she's like, dad is not going to pay. So you have to fund yourself. So why don't you just get into a PhD program,
Mhm.
get your coursework, leave with the masters, right? And I'm like, cool, this sounds good. And I get to study something that I like. I get to live by myself, and I get to do this for free. So why not? Lo and behold, the program that I went to, you cannot get a master's. You have to get a PhD. So that's how I got my PhD. Now, and does that inspire you to take action towards your PhD?
I mean, it inspires me to, follow my calling and have
Yeah.
really cool elder siblings that,
Oh
come
yeah.
up with such great ideas. Like, I'm just blown away that she was just like, let's go talk to some professors.
Yeah.
That's such a, boss move in my mind to
She
encourage your
did.
younger sibling to do that.
Although she's very Walter Whitey, let me just say that.
Oh,
Okay, I am Jesse Pinkman in this relationship. I'm kidding. I just watched. Have you watched Breaking Bad?
it's my favorite show of all time.
I have watched it twice. Okay, now here's the thing. I did not know about, like, I knew about Breaking Bad. I'm like, what is this violence? I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
So I was getting bored this summer, and I'm like, I need something to watch. So I watched Breaking Bad, and I watched it at like 1.25 speed, just like blasting through this. I don't want to watch it on my phone. And then like season 3 comes around, I'm like, shit, this is amazing. I need to pay attention. So I half-assed the entire show, and then I did revision on that show again.
Hmm.
So it's very much ingrained in my mind. I watched the final episode for the second time yesterday.
Felina.
Pinkman Walter White thing is very much in my mind. I'm like, is my sister the Walter White in this relationship? Because she's like,
Hmm.
you want this. You want to come to the US. And I'm like, do I?
First of all, thank you so much for walking us through that really amazing journey that you just shared. That's quite incredible to especially get the context around where you were, what you were doing, and
Mhm.
how you came to be doing what you're doing currently.
So
Hmm.
even with immigration, after I got my PhD, then I went into being a professor, and I again did not want to be a professor. Seriously, I've been trying to quit education since class 12, if you've forgotten about that. But when I was there, I was like, let's have fun with it. So I was a professor in communication studies. I taught my students complex interpersonal communication things with memes.
Hmm.
We did role playing activities. I cultivated this entire line of research on online dating, hookups, all of this, right?
Wow.
Like it was just it, and that became my thing. And I did that till 2022, put it into high gear because my green card was attached to my professional growth. And that's the thrust of Dr. Paul and Company, to bring it back to, and like, tie a little bow around the first
Mhm.
question that you had. What I do in Dr. Paul and Company, it's educate immigrants on talent visas, particularly employment based priority one. And
Mhm.
I've been through this journey. So I started sharing my story in 2022,
Mhm.
but just like Breaking Bad, like I just got nerdy with it. Like truly, truly nerdy. Like just before this call, how diabolically nerdy I am. I keep getting this question, I am X, can I qualify for this? And I'm like, listen,
Mm.
the weirdest professions qualify for this. Somebody who's a circus performer applied for a talent visa. Somebody who's a beatboxer applied for a talent visa. And you're telling me that your master's in data science cannot get you a talent visa? Come on, man. Like it's cool. Everybody can do it. But yeah, I just get really nerdy with things that I enjoy. It's a problem.
Well, I would, argue that maybe it's the opposite of that. Maybe I'm just projecting because I'm kind of the same way. When I
Yeah.
finished Better Call Saul, which is the prequel to Breaking Bad,
Don't tell me.
well, I was just gonna say, if you like Breaking Bad, you should 100% give that a shot. Everything
Yeah.
that they did really well on Breaking Bad, they kind of perfected that art and really just went full throttle on all those things that worked
Oh,
really well on Breaking Bad. So I'll leave that to
yeah.
that. My question to you, going back to your experience as a professor, and I'm really curious to know a couple things. What level were you teaching, firstly, and can you talk a little bit more about like your work with communication, especially around the dating app stuff you mentioned, because that just piqued my curiosity a little bit.
Yeah. Again, remember how I told you everything good that has happened in my life, there was a concerted effort to not do it.
Mhm.
That was the genesis of my research and my PhD days as
Mhm.
well. And this was the first post that I made on LinkedIn, which went viral.
Mhm.
So in 2014, there was my 3 years into a very high stakes PhD program. And I had not done a lot of research. It took my time really to grow because, I mean, I used to be very hard on myself. But upon reflection, I realized that the environment that I was put in probably was not ready to support where I was coming from. So I was a bachelor's and master's in computer science. Everybody who was in the program kind of already knew the chops of communication and how to write a paper, etc. I didn't, right? I took my time. But anyways, 2014, the director of the program calls me into his office and says, "Well, Aditi, the entire department has decided to fire you from the program. You have 3 months left because your student assistantship is still on. But after the clocks runs out, you have to pack your bags." And I was aghast. I was
Did
so
they say
shocked.
why?
Yeah, they said that you have not produced enough research. Like you haven't shown the maturity. And word for word, I
Gotcha.
can tell you, they said that you don't have what it takes to bear the name of this university's PhD
Oh
on you.
boy,
And I'm like, okay, all
that's
right.
harsh.
And have you have you ever been in a position where you sweat, but it's cold sweat, right? Like everything is a numb, and that's how I felt at that time. And this professor was like, well, you can fight this decision if you want, if you think that we have done it unfairly, etc. But that was the genesis of it all, right? So I heard this news in May 14th, 2020, 2014. I still have that day etched in my memory. So between then to August end, I had to demonstrate that I had everything that it takes to be in this program, to earn
Mhm.
the right to be in the program. And at that time, I was taking a statistics course outside of my department. It's a
Mhm.
sociology 800 level course on STATA. I don't know if you've heard of this statistical program. It's kind of like R, SPSS, all of those. So I'm taking a course on Stata, and the professor said you have to do a homework on a data set. And I'm like, okay, fine. Which data set do I find out? So I found out this data set called How Couples Meet and Stay Together. And it was
Oh,
a
cool.
multi-year, multi-wave study. and I crunched the numbers on that data just for a college assignment. But the data was pretty cool, and I'm like, okay, I need to do something with this, right? Um, Somehow, when you're set an intention through desperation or whatever it is, your brain becomes a magnet. I'm convinced of that. Because what happened after that is a story. It's surreal till this date. So I remember going to a professor's office hours, and there was a poster on her wall saying 2000 word short research report for this journal called Cyber Psychology, Behavior, and Social Networking. I was like, listen, 2000 words, fine. Let me just like apply it. And Delulu is the Salulu, because this journal was like the top journal in cyber psychology. Me in my utter delusion to be like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to apply. And I wrote about 2000 word paper and I submitted it. 2 months later, a month and a half later, I get a message from the journal saying, your paper is accepted as is. And I'm like, oh
Wow.
my God, I have a publication now. What are you saying? And this isn't a big journal. And I'm like, the best has happened. I'm so happy. I mean, I'm seeing hope, right? Like I'm seeing some hope. And I thought that's as good as it gets. A couple of days later, after the paper comes out, I get an email from a guy called John who says that he's a reporter from Playboy. I'm like, this has to be a scam. What is this? So John comes and says, hi, Dr. Paul. I'm not a doctor yet. I'm still a PhD student. Hi, Dr. Paul. We saw this paper has come out on like how couples meet and stay together. Your data has showed that people who meet online are twice as likely to get divorced. We would like to interview you. There are there are some couple of questions. And I'm like, okay, completely convinced that this is some guy from somewhere on the earth and like totally scamming me, but I'm rolling with it. Before you know it, the Washington Post is reaching out, Huffington Post is reaching out, NBC News is reaching out. I'm on iHeartRadio's interviews. Philadelphia Inquirer is quoting me. Shit is wild, right? And I'm like, what is happening? The paper went viral. It was one of the top papers in the journal. And I was like, man, so something which was just an assignment to go this viral, let alone just being published, but I was happy. But that gave me the flavor of how cool research is going to be. Yes, it saved my ass for sure. That same professor came back, how petty. He's like, ask them to remove the PhD from your name because you're not a PhD yet. And I'm like, okay. And then they put me on their website. They put me on their website as featured student, featured work. And I'm like, cool, man, I see how it is. But yeah, that was the genesis of my interest in online dating as a viable area to do research, which could capture the sentiment of popular media so hard.
I mean, I feel like you nailed the hammer on the head there. Delulu is the Salulu. This is not something I've heard before. I have to say, I'm very tempted to just call our episode that. Like, I'll just title this
Lulu,
episode.
Lulu, I'm telling you.
But what was that like? I can't imagine what it would be like to suddenly be front and center across all of these, big media slash publishing houses. What was that experience like for you?
It was nothing sparked up my imposter syndrome quite like that success.
Really?
Yeah, because in May, I was listening to a professor say that nobody in the
Yeah.
department thinks they're good enough. And now you have this blockbuster of a hit. What does your brain tell you? I don't deserve this. Right? This is I'm a one trick pony. And and I was convinced of that for the longest time. And it took me from 2014 to 2019, 4 years to work and gain that confidence. It was quite a journey, because even if you have such a success, you can't undo the scars that are left from such a traumatic event. And I had to do a lot of inner work and a lot of outer work to undo that. And quite honestly, 2021 is when I realized I am a good researcher. This is after I got tenure at my professor job, after I wrote a book, etc. That's when I was convinced that, yeah, I think I can do this. And then I quit academia. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, I bet that felt like, I made it type moment. I think I do realize, and something I want to call out is I think you raised a really important point there about imposter syndrome and dealing with that lack of confidence. And I think that dovetails very nicely into a question that I wanted to ask you, which was like more largely around the immigrant experience as a whole. I feel like
Hmm.
I for sure can relate to feeling like that. Like I didn't even do half as anything as cool as you did. Like, but I found myself sat in a master's class at Purdue University
Hmm.
in my first month here, and just as you said earlier, sweating those cold sweat droplets, thinking, am I good enough to be here? Like there are people
Right.
surrounding me that are like they just all seem so smart and almost intimidating, including the professors. I was just like, have I made a mistake? Am I even going to pass this? And I, through my interactions with other peers and other people that I interact with, I've learned that that's something that's unfortunately extremely common. So I guess my question to you is, in all the work that you do with immigrants and your background specifically around psychology, what is something that you've learned about the psychology of immigration, like things that you've seen or noticed that most of us deal with, but that there isn't a lot of awareness around, and it would
Mm.
really help us to kind of know that and prepare for that. Knowing that I have this deficit makes it really helpful in dealing with that, because like how can you deal with a problem that you don't even know exists? So I
Right.
know that, yeah, I don't know if that question makes sense, but are you willing to share anything on that at all?
Boilermaker.
That
That's
is
the
me.
one, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Boilermaker.
Boiler up,
I
hammer down.
also boiler. These Midwest schools need to chill the fuck out. I'm sorry. Like they are so gung ho on these like things like
Hey, be
Spartans were
nice. That's all
marching.
they have.
That's honestly what they have. Oh my god. My
You
roots
can't
are
take
still
that
in.
away. Yeah.
You can't. You really can't. Because just this, I never realized what tailgating is until I went
Mm,
to Michigan State, and the tailgating can be a cultural experience in and of its own. But yeah,
truly,
I mean,
truly.
yeah. But yeah, boiler. I like your colors, like gold and black, right?
Hmm.
It's good. You said something, and there was a word that snuck into what you just said, and I want to double down on that word. And that
Uh-oh.
word is you, but in a good way. You
Okay.
said that I was a master's student. I was sitting in my class, and everybody seemed to be smarter than me. And we want to hunker down on that word seemed. There are two things at play over here, right? I mean, my background is in communication studies, and within that, like communication is a pirate field, we say, which because it touches upon sociology, psychology, culture, etc.
Gotcha.
It's a very unique combination to be Indian in the US because the cultures are so different. There's this, man, I'm going to be so nerdy. There's this professor slash researcher. His name is Geert Hofstede, Geerthofstede, Geert Hofstede. So he measured the culture of each country based on 5 factors. One of
Hmm.
those factors is individualism versus collectivism. That's one.
Hmm.
And the other factor is power distance, right? If
Gotcha.
a culture is flat or if a culture has a higher power hierarchy, right? We come from a very collectivist, high power distance culture, right? What that means is, first of all, we are taught to be very humble, that our win is everybody's win. It's not my win, nothing me. There is no me in this, it's we. So
Hmm.
that's the culture that we grew up in. And power distance is you have to be somebody, right?
I see.
For example, you were from a Birla school. I
Mhm.
too was from a Birla school. But then there are La Martiniere folks,
Yep.
right? They are the fancier ones. We are from CBSE board. Like it's a good day when we can speak one word of English, but then we have not been brought up on the Shakespeare's and everything. So there is a whole thing about status. There's a whole thing about humility. And now you've come to the US, which is very individualistic. My nephew, who's
Hmm.
born and raised over here, he says things like, I'm really good at math. I'm like, you dwarf. Like, what do you mean you are really good? Which prodigy do you think you are? Because my knee jerk reaction is, let me give him a very complex mathematical problem.
Yep.
He's going to stumble, and I'm going to show
Yep.
him you're not the best, right? That's how we grew up, because we're constantly challenged. We are constantly being asked to show our aukat, right? So that becomes very ingrained in us, Naman.
Mhm.
And now you have uprooted yourself from that, and you've come to the US, which is highly individualistic and it's extremely flat. And what I mean by flat is, just because you're a professor, just because you're a researcher, doesn't mean I cannot challenge you. So that sense of authority is very, very low. So those factors kind of are so ingrained in us that we don't even understand that that's playing a role in it. That's why we ascribe a lot of authority to other people, right? Even if they're like, but there's this reel that goes around right now. My brain works in reels, if you haven't realized, right? There's this reel called Just Because. Do you know that?
Can't say I do.
No. So there's this reel which says, दो चार इंग्लिश शब्द क्या बोल दिए बने स्मार्ट तुम्हें, right? Like that.
Okay,
So
gotcha. Yeah.
if somebody speaks very boisterously, we are like, oh my god, this person knows what they're talking
Must be
about.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, must be right? But American culture is very boisterous that way. It's a
Mhm.
talk culture. There's a third aspect that I want to talk about culture is low context and high context. I'm being such a professor right now. Oh my
No,
gosh.
I feel like honestly, this is great. So
Thank
please,
you.
please continue.
Thank you. But yeah, Americans are low context, which means everything they do is with words. But Indians, we are high context, which because we are very non-verbally. That's where the head nod even comes in, right? Like, oh, ho jayega, sir. Like, chinta, like, there's no,
Mhm.
don't take too much load, right? Like,
Yeah.
we are a very like non-verbally. If we have to say thank you to somebody, we don't say thank you. We do it with like an extra pav on their pav bhaji. We are supposed we show our love like that.
Mhm.
But you've come to a culture which is very individualistic, doesn't give a crap about authority, and uses words. You're a person who is taught to be humble, who cannot for life challenge authority, because we are not taught to do that, and nor do we have the cultural construct to do it. And third, we are not used to saying and speaking so much, right? We're not a talk based culture. It's just how we work. So when you put those two things together, now that's a recipe for a lot of mindfuckery. Pardon my French, but it is. And it's not as easy as just popping a pill and undoing all of that. It takes gradually, it takes time. Just like your accent changes over time, right? Or just like you understand miles over kilometers or
Mhm.
Fahrenheit over Celsius, it's an internal rewiring that you have to go to, and it has to be very, very conscious. So to your point, what are some of those things that's holding us back, or what is it that we need to do? You don't have to do anything, first of
Mhm.
all. You just have to accept it as it is, and then you have to adapt. Not losing your inner core, but understanding that this is the environment that you're in. That's what I would say.
Couple call outs on that really amazing analysis you put out there. I can relate to what you said about the authority piece because at least for my first 6 months dealing with, academia or professors, I had to bite my tongue because I was so close to calling people sir every time. And I
Right.
was like, there is no sir here. Like, there
There's
is
no sir.
nobody that I need to refer. It's weird, straight up, to refer to. Like, I did that a couple times, and the professor looked at me like, What are you doing, bro? Don't
Mm.
do that." So, but you're right. Like, that is how deeply it is ingrained in us to almost seek authority, even in places where it's just unnecessary. So,
Right.
yeah, really like that call out. The other thing that I guess jumped out to me was what you said around the only thing that we can do realistically is accept. So I guess the tool slash hacker aficionado in me is like people that have a higher levels of self awareness. Would you say that they might do slightly better in terms of you know like avoiding some of these pitfalls when it comes to accepting that they are in fact wherever they are due to their merit, they deserve to be there. There is no
Mm.
imposter stuff going on, or do you think that's it doesn't play that big of a part, as it does in my head?
So you asked a question about self-awareness, which tells me that you're very self-aware to even ask this question. So I would ask this question back to you. That have you seen instances in your life? Can you do a compare and contrast between, yeah, you know what, like I think you consider yourself as a self-aware person. So how would you contrast your behavior with somebody who clearly in your eyes is not self-aware? How does that behavior differentiate?
Way to put me on the spot here, but I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I feel like there's almost um like there needs to be a voluntary effort to reflect. And I think a lot of people don't see the value in doing that, which is fine, but I do. So I'm the type of person that just, I don't know, just by nature, I like to, at the end of a day, just think, just sit and think, like what happened, how did I deal with a certain scenario, what could I have done better? And in doing so, at least in my first few, I would say years in the US, I've only been here 4 years, so nothing crazy, but yeah, after the first 1.5 years, I felt I felt like I had it figured out. That like my biggest learnings were everything here works on, PR. Marketing is at the
Oh
core
yeah.
of every single interaction, relationship, person, literally you name it. It's built on marketing. Like it's the bedrock of, American society. And yeah, once I realized that, obviously things became easier. You can, you become the shape of the vessel you're in, really is the goal after a point. And when you don't have to do that, like when I'm just hanging out with my Indian friends, I can be Indian. So it's almost that weird dual identity situation that comes up that I'm okay with knowing why I do that and being cognizant of the fact that I do that. But having said that, I do realize that if somebody is not taking the time to think and has more clearly, like other nicer things to think about, they might suddenly find themselves at that crossroads and struggle and be like, why am I doing this? Why am I behaving separately with my boss and my roommate? Where is that coming from? Why is that happening? Does that
Right.
all make any sense at all?
Your question was, does being self-aware help? Now, whatever you have described so far seems like being self-aware is a lot of work. Does an average person want to do work? Probably not. Not a lot of people want to do work. Self-awareness is a bane and a boon in and of itself. So what I would say is self-aware is good if you can put up with the work. But there is a reason why people say ignorance is bliss. If you turn a blind eye, you don't have to do the work. It doesn't exist. Right?
Mhm.
If you shut your eyes, everything disappears. But you have to have that courage, you have to have that willingness, you have to have that drive to say, listen, this is different. I see there is a disconnect and I want to bridge it. And that requires work. And unfortunately, we don't want to do that work. So yeah, self-awareness helps, but it comes with a price. There's a lot of gyan that I just gave.
No,
Oh
I,
my.
I'm just trying to really just take a couple seconds to, have what you just said sink in because, again, this is only like my 15th episode, but I have to say none of them have really been, even
Oh
as
my god,
close
am I the
to.
topper? Am I the topper? This is the number one episode, you
There it
mean to
is.
say? Oh
I,
my
I
god,
I'm just saying, I've never felt more engaged while recording. I
suck
truly
it all the
feel
first 14. Go ahead, get suck it. This is how you do it. Come on. No,
one
I'm
out of
kidding. Kidding.
14,
Much love.
100 percentile.
Did it. Wow. But
Shifting
no,
gears
I
just a
really,
little bit.
but I do want to acknowledge how wonderfully you've put that. And I am so tempted to ask you, I know we're like 38 minutes into the conversation, but if you can tell me, how did you realize America is a PR machine? Fun fact, I didn't know about this. One of my friends told me that propaganda as a concept started in the US. The saner sister of propaganda is PR and media and marketing. I'm very well aware of that. But I'm curious, like, in 4 years, how did you catch on to that? What were some of the what led you to get this insight? I'm very interested in that.
That is such yeah, I mean that's such a great question. I feel like we can think of these things as pillars, I would say. So
Mm.
as any mid-20s young adult person, I was at the time seeking um interpersonal relationships, and a
Mhm.
big driver to this realization was my interaction with not just American people, especially but like mostly American people, but also other immigrants in America.
Were
So
you
it
trying
was
to date? Is this an online dating question, Naman? Be honest. What is this seeking interpersonal relationships coming from? Be honest.
it wasn't just of the dating nature, it was also more of, seeking friendship, companionship, you
Yeah.
name it. But
Yeah.
it falls under that umbrella. I mean, yeah.
Right.
So really what it felt like was I was in this big playground. There were a lot of kids there. Nobody knew what they were doing, except there were a few kids that looked like they had it figured out. And I made friends with them, and I just really picked their brains, like straight up harassed them for a long time until they divulged things that then I added together and came to this conclusion that, like the whole PR thing. And then I used to go grocery shopping. I used to see how everybody wakes up, sits in their little car, drives themselves to their work, heads down, works all day, comes back in their car, having spends days, weeks, months without talking to a single other person. Like
Mm.
the memes, we live in a society, but is it a society really? You just kind of by yourself. Like there's people around you, but it doesn't concern you in any way. And what
Right.
drives that? Like, how does that person know how to behave like that? It is, as you said, individualism, but a lot of times that is informed, and the fuel I feel like that keeps it throbbing is that marketing or PR. Like, put on
Mm.
your AirPods, you don't need to talk to anybody. If somebody says hi in the bus or it looks like they're trying to make eye contact, just look down on your phone, focus on your TikTok. There's way more important things going on there. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's very hard question to answer, if I'm being honest, but yeah, those are at least a couple really big pillars that
Mm.
kind of made me see the light, quote unquote.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. It really boils down to perception, right? How does the other person see me? How do I want them to see
Mm.
me? And yeah, really good observation on the whole AirPod thing. I used to think it was a very American thing, but then I went to Singapore
Mhm.
in 2016, and oh my gosh, like you go to a subway, nobody is making any eye contact. Everybody is glued to their phone. And I'm like, what is happening? It's a global phenomenon. So just as an act of rebellion, when I'm traveling in the subway, I will just stare at people. Um, it is not a surprise that I don't have too many friends, because stuff like that.
I know you
Everything
were
is
in India recently. Did you have a similar experience in India as well? Would you say that is it like a Western thing? I don't know if we can classify Singapore as the West. Maybe we can, arguably. But did you
yeah.
see any difference in India, or has India fallen as well?
I didn't travel on public transportation.
Okay.
That's the first thing. So I didn't like really get a chance to see. But
Mhm.
I mean, just being on the phone is such a universal thing right now.
That's fair.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I cannot comment on that. But yeah, India is always great. I mean, I go to India every opportunity I get. I'm going to Durga Puja this time also.
Me
Very
too,
excited.
actually, funnily
Really?
enough. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I'll be there
Oh
in
my God.
October.
Me too. All right. We'll talk about this offline. But yeah,
Totally.
getting back to the podcast.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of wanted to tie in with a little bit about your expertise on the EB1. So
Mhm.
to just quickly kind of go over that whole can of worms, so to speak. So from my very limited understanding, what I understand about it is that there's three categories. The first would be if you've been a manager outside the US and then you come here and you're eligible. The second, I believe, is if you have research slash teaching experience for at least 3 years, I believe. And then the
Mhm.
third, which is the most interesting to me, is that if you have an extraordinary talent. So
Yeah.
couple questions there. I know you are the holder of an EB1. So which category of these three was it that got you yours? And are you willing to speak a little bit on the third category that I referenced, which is the extraordinary ability? What exactly does that mean? And I know you referenced that briefly earlier when you said that if somebody has a data science background, that's pretty extraordinary. They might be eligible. And if so, why is there such less awareness about it? Because I only really heard of this from interactions with you actually and your LinkedIn. So
Mm.
I know lots of questions bundled into one, as I
Mhm.
am prone to doing, in case you haven't noticed. But yeah, if you don't mind humoring me.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, you think that you are late into the game, but if it makes you feel any better, I got to know about EB1 maybe 5 years into the US. Yeah, so like around that time as well. So you're right on time or early,
Hmm.
if anything. The first thing that I do want to again go back to is I did not want to do this again. Right, running script in my life. But before I tell you about the specifics of EB1, your audience should know why should they care about this, right? Like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
um I'm assuming, right, it might be wrong, but I'm assuming that a majority of your audience who's listening to this is born in India, are in the US, or want to come to the US,
Mhm.
or they're your family members, which is completely fine as well. Naman Bhaiya is
Or
doing a
your
podcast.
family members.
Support. My family members listen to me a lot. They don't need a podcast, but I will
Ah,
ask them to support your podcast.
there go
But they are
five of my views, but
Uh, but my mom is also the biggest troll, by the way. Like,
wow.
she will go to Facebook and she, again, complete sidetrack of EB1, total ADHD happening right now. But I go to Facebook and one of my friends, she's like, "Have you seen what Auntie has posted?" And I'm like, "What has she posted? Oh my gosh!" So there are these. By the way, Facebook Live for for my dad and mom's generation is our Insta Reels. They are on Facebook Live and like all those
What?
videos all the time. It is. I am telling you. But my mom goes to this mukbang video where this kid keeps like shoving food into her
Uh,
mouth. And she's a fairly young woman, and my mom puts a comment saying, in Bengali, she says that, don't your parents scold you? Like, what kind of parents do they have?" And I'm like, why are you trolling this kid? And she said the most interesting thing. She's like, I'm telling it for her own good. So
ah,
it is like salah dena for her, right? It's not
yep.
even trolling. She's like, I'm telling her the right thing. And then in some other person's, she's cooking the video and she's chilofying the garlic or ginger in a certain way, and my mom comments, is like, if you do it this way, and I'm like, please, can you stop? All my friends can see your
That's
comment.
so wholesome, though. I mean, it's so nice. It gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling just hearing
Yeah.
that.
Yes, so she might come to your podcast and be like, Naman, you know what, that one painting at the back should be on the top left hand corner side. So don't be amazed if you get that
I would
comment. It's
be
probably
heartbroken if that happens because God knows I spent, and I won't mention how many hours, but a lot of time in that particular setup.
yeah.
So, but
If you don't
again,
want your heart ripped, you don't want my parents to listen to this podcast.
okay,
Anywho's in.
noted.
um I I again did not want to do an EB1, but I should say that people who are born in India, who are in the US, who are planning to come to the US, you need to understand what's at stake. Because the US immigration system is like the ultimate hurdle race. It will put so many hurdles in front of you that it makes you short sighted.
Hmm.
Because think about it, when we come to the US, even when we get an admit from a university, you're like, जब तक F1 हाथ में नहीं आता, जब तक मैं वो कतार एयरलाइन की टिकट ना काट लूं, यहाँ पे ना आ जाओ, it's not real, right? So once you get your F1, you're like, okay, fine, I'm here. And then comes OPT, and
Mhm.
then comes H1B. So every single time you have so many hurdles, and there are so many ways in which this can go wrong,
Mhm.
that you don't even think about the future. Because the common sentiment in your generation, Naman, who have been here for 4 years, for 5 years, is like, yeah, I'm living YOLO. ठीक है? Like, what permanent resident in the US? मुझे पता ही नहीं है. I want to live here for the long haul or not. I want to pack my
Mm.
bags and leave. I want to be in Bali for 3 months and like harvest coconuts if I want to. I'm not dying to be a permanent resident in the US. I get that. I totally get that. But you have to separate your desire for being in the US, and you have to focus on your safety in being in the US. And
I
you have
see.
to focus on your ambition of being in the US. If visas like STEM, OPT, etc., would allow me to live my life unobstructed in the US with as much liberty as I need, I wouldn't have given a shit about EB1. quite honestly speaking. मैं मर नहीं रही हूँ यहाँ पे permanent resident बनने के लिए. Again, I do not want to come to the US, right? I'm being very real, very honest, very upfront with you. Because I've heard this so many times from people who are like, man, I mean, I don't even want to be in the US for the long haul. Why think about a permanent residence? You're not thinking about this, right? It's almost like, why would I even go to the gym? I don't want to have muscles. Well, do you want to avoid the off chance of you getting a disease that could be the detriment to your health? Well, no, then you might want to work out 1 or 2 times at the gym. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So EB1 is your route to being a permanent resident in the US, because you will see that at some point in your immigration journey, you're gonna feel the pain, and I hope you do. I hope you feel the pain. The pain is either going to come from you getting laid off, you wanting to switch the company because you have outgrown this company, or you don't like your toxic workplace. You're going to get in line for a green card, and then you're going to see that, oh my gosh, it's 140 years. All my friends who had come with me are already citizens and have opened our companies, and I am still papad beloing for H1B. It's going to hurt. And I hope it does hurt, because that's going to give you the impetus to do something about it. That's where EB1 came into my life, because I was a professor living a good enough life in New York City, for that matter. Again, I'm in Jersey City, I'm not in New York City. But I used to work in New York City. It's a very important distinction to make, because people are going to come to my throat. But I was at my job, and things started turning very sour in 2019. I could not just pack up my bags and leave, because I was on an H1B, and I was not just on an H1B. I'm not going to get into too much into it. It was a non-transferable H1B. The only way that I could move was to another university. And New York City is as good as it gets. I'm not going to teach in the boonies of Central Missouri. I'm sorry. Like, I don't love teaching that much. I'd rather be in a city in India. But 2019, there came a time, and the incidents happened where I'm like, I can't be in this professorship job, but I can't leave, because my H1B is attached to them. My green card has been applied, but it's going to take 100 years for me to get it, which means I'm going to see Yamraj before I see the face of a green card. So what do? That's when I took EB1 very seriously, because EB1 is a priority pass to get your green card. If you think about it, you have given, the one stands for first preference. So if there is a bucket full of green cards available, you are the first people to get dibs on it. If something is left, then it goes to the second category. If something is left, then it goes to the third category. And shit hit the fan in 2020, right? You know how in Breaking Bad, like season 3, there's a time where Walter White, it's that inflection point where he is an absolute drug pin. Like, he has reached the fringes of morality, and now he's going to the dark side. That's an inflection point. That was the inflection point in 2020 in my life, when COVID hit, and one of my friend's father passed away, and he had to see the cremation of his father on WhatsApp, because he could not travel to India, and his green card was still pending. I did not want that for me. I was adamant in me not wanting to settle for the fact that I either choose my profession that I've worked very hard for, or I have to choose my family. That is not fair. If Samantha and Jordan is not being asked to make this choice, neither should Aditi. And the only way that I could get out of this was qualify for EB1 despite all the hurdles. So even before I tell you the checklist of EB1, I need you to know the motivation behind it. Because a lot of people, when you're talking about awareness about EB1, I want them to be aware of the hurdles.
That actually explains so much, especially what you said around it. It almost sounds like it's akin to an insurance. Like, you hope you don't need it almost. Maybe that's not the best analogy, but you
It
hope
is
you
the
don't
best
need it.
analogy.
Okay, I see. Yeah,
It
but
is the best, because I say that all the time, that
okay.
over here you have car insurance, you have health insurance, you have home insurance. What about that insurance based on which everything else in your life is existing? Because everything exists on your immigration status. Have you ever
Right.
given it a thought? Right?
That's so true.
And people will say things like, maximum kya hi hoga, right? You know, chale jayenge India. Like, I'm sorry, what? right? Even if I go to India, which I will and I have, it
Right.
has to be in my terms. So you have to have that certain level of self respect to want to do this. It's not because, see, as Indians, we have a very figure it out mentality, the jugaad mentality, right? Push comes to shove, we have been fighting to become the top of anything since we were 2 years old, right? Our little heads have been shoved into tuition classes, right? Since we were like, we started saying A. So we have been built and programmed to be and beat the crowd and be ahead of the curve anyway. We're going to figure this out. That's not a problem, right? Hard work has never been the problem for us Indians. And I don't even have to know you personally to know that you're a hard worker. The problem is priority, and the problem is awareness. Like, why should you do it and how should you do it? That's
Exactly.
it. Once you figure that out, you're going to figure out the what.
Yeah, and also your point around, doing coconut farming in Bali, you can still
Yeah.
do that. Like, it's not
Yeah.
like getting an EB1 prevents you from doing that, but as you said, you do that on your own terms. And there's
That's
such
right.
a huge difference between those two scenarios. So,
Right.
is it really hard to get it? Like, what's
Very, don't even try. It's a lost cause, Naman. You will never get it. If that's see, if reverse psychology plays, I hope you really try. Uh, no, but yeah, people can do EB1, yeah. And I'm so you are the right person to talk to about this because you have figured out the true fabric of the American society. That is PR and marketing, right? Right? Like, for example, this podcast. If today you decide to claim that you're a person of extraordinary ability in podcasting,
I could do
right? Your
that,
podcast,
first of all? What?
you can, but I wouldn't suggest you do.
Okay, but
Um,
it is
you,
doable.
yeah.
Okay, I see.
What's your profession? What do you do for a
Um, I'm a senior business analyst, so STEM, STEM,
living?
STEM guy.
Okay, so if you have to dumb it down, not dumb it down, I would say
Hmm?
chats. If I have to consider you as Chat GPT and I just gave you the prompt,
Sure,
simplify this for me. What would
sure.
your answer be?
Yep. So I work in commercial real estate. I
Mm-hmm.
work in the center of excellence that sits on top of all the other verticals, being brokership, taxation, whatever. And where I come in is I help people automate their job. So if you're doing something like a swivel chair email operations that take you 4 hours to do every week, I'll come
Mm-hmm.
in, teach you how to make a bot that does that in 2 seconds, thereby returning 4 hours every week to your life for the foreseeable future. Does that help?
Wow, that was a little too coherent than I care to admit.
Okay.
But you're right. It's good. It's good. So your job is to save people time and money by automating jobs for them,
Exactly. Yep.
right? Now it sounds ठीक है, like dal chawal types, like क्या
Yeah.
ही तीर मार लिया. I'm just saying,
No,
right?
just a
This is
tech
how
bro, just any
see
other tech bro. Yeah.
any other tech bro, right? Like that's what you do because you're one of many, right? It does not sound very extraordinary if you just say that, but
Mhm.
now you have to paint the picture as is. So you have to
See.
peel it back, right? You have to say, okay, like you automate. Why care about automation? Do a before and after, right? Before automation, what happened? How
Hmm.
much money were people spending? How many hours did they have? How many
Yeah.
manpower did they have? What kind of jobs were being compromised, right? What is the productivity? What is the impact on US economy? You
Hmm.
have to draw that picture. Then you say, see, now I automate. Let me show you how I automate. And by the way, the job that I do, the automation job that I just told you about, I have gotten recognition from these other people. And because I have so much expertise in that, people in my field have also asked me to judge the quality of their work.
Wow.
You have an EB1 narrative now. And this
Wow.
podcast may or may not count because it's not aligned to automation. Whereas if you're
Hmm.
doing a podcast on automation and you get folks to talk about automation, and that podcast garners a readership, listenership of $160,000 from 11 countries, and somebody listened to something in that podcast, got that insight, and did something about it, thus creating impact with something that you generated, that's impact. Now you can use a podcast. It's as simple as that.
I love, like, it actually took me a while to understand that you were actually this whole time answering my question. Because at first I was like, well, why? This is not about me. Why is she drilling down on what I do? But yeah, I feel like I know exactly what happens or what one needs to do for an EB1 now.
right?
So you're saying that I can mix and match those three categories that I referenced. It doesn't have to just come from one of them. There's this ability that I have to kind of combine forces. Am I right in assuming that? Okay, gotcha.
Absolutely. You have to be creative,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's as much about hard work as it is about creative work. You have to
Mm-hmm.
see opportunities, you have to be able to spot opportunities, you have to be able to create opportunities, and you're already doing that, Naman. Nobody asked you to start a podcast, you did it on your own accord. And if I have to pinpoint what are those top 3 traits of somebody who's going to be a successful EB1 candidate, like I said, self starter. You have to be a self starter, and you're
Mm-hmm.
doing that. You're already showing signs of that. So I would highly encourage you to pursue it. And what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hold on, I have to show you something. Give me 1 second. Can you see?
Yeah.
I
It,
got his book and I read his book. That's how big of a nerd I am, because I was like, I need to know this man. I
how
need to.
was it? How was it?
Gosh, this guy, I'm telling you, can you see the number of like things that I have bookmarked? It's so amazing, right? It's so amazing. He said something, he's just so much in love with the work that he does, right? Like he talks about how he's always been. Now this is a Breaking Bad podcast, okay? This is not an EB1 podcast, this is not an Aditi Paul podcast, this is not a Naman Pandey podcast, this is a Breaking Bad podcast. But yeah, I was so enamored by Bryan Cranston because his acting is so impeccable. And when I saw the interviews, like the one sentiment that I got from his all of what he was saying is that he just loves what he does. Breaking Bad was not his first break. He has been an acting actor since he was 25 years old, and he was
Mhm.
doing all of this other stuff. Breaking Bad was him being a celebrity. That's very different. But yeah, I just love him so much. It's the name of the book is A Life in Parts, and he talks about the different roles he has played in his life. Uh, and it's been very therapeutic for me, because probably this is the last thing that I'll say on your podcast is when I look at other friends, how they have lived very monolithic lives, right? Like they got a degree, they got a job in that, they have climbed the ladder to become a director in that, very very aligned, like very straightforward. And then I look at my life and I'm like, bachelor's and master's in computer science, used to MC shows in India, became an entertainment host, was a professor, now a business owner. Beach mein there was a UX research, and I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah, we
And then I
didn't
realized,
even get to cover the entertainment part. I can't believe you're bringing
yeah,
it up now. Why would you do that?
it was very cool. I like performing arts, but this book kind of gave me solace knowing that life can be lived in parts.
Wow. I feel like really we could just keep, going.
Right.
I'm still like my brain is swimming in questions that I would love to get your take on. But in terms of the time today, I know we had a fixed agenda, and
Mhm.
with respect to your time, I think we should stick to that. So it's been such an absolute delight talking to you, listening to your experiences, and learning from you. Not
Mhm.
to say the probably biggest takeaway for me was I did not realize coming into this podcast that I would be tempted, seriously tempted to consider the EB1 route, just having known that it exists. The fact that you were so effectively able to convey to me that it's not just like a, pipe dream, it's truly and well available for anybody that's willing to put in the work, I think has been my biggest takeaway from this. So thank you so, so much for taking the time and for doing all the amazing work that you do for not just immigrants, but really all the lives you touch with, spreading awareness about EB1 and, yeah, just being you, just being your authentic and, naysayer to experiences and then doing those same exact things um, person in the, the person that you are. So thank you so, so
Thank
much,
you.
Aditi.
Thank you so much, Naman. You've given me more serotonin and dopamine than I can handle. So Thank you for that. I appreciate it. But and great job on the podcast. Thank you for having me, and I'm wishing you all the luck.
That brings us to the end of episode 19 of the Ready Set Do podcast. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for sharing these conversations with those that continue to benefit from them. As always, catch you all in the next one, new episodes every Wednesday.